Welcome to the Path Podcast, where we will travel the lives of some bold women, from dreams to detours to destiny. She did not choose this path chose her. This is the Path Podcast. Welcome back, Path listeners, to another episode of the Path Podcast with your sister, your motivator, your confidence builder, the one who believes that purpose is bigger than obstacles. In speaking with my guest today, Path listeners, there were several things that stood out to me. One being, she said to me, I never learned how to live because I was always in survival mode. As we all know, the month of October is a month that brings awareness to many great causes, affecting people all over the world. Today, we are traveling the path of this bold woman and bringing awareness to domestic violence. We will touch on sexual violence and substance abuse as well. All are critical and are standalone topics that should be talked about daily to help those who have fallen victim to it and to any others, and to not feel ashamed, to uplift their stories, to raise awareness, and it's about finding ways to stop it. Today, let me tell you a little bit about my guest and who she is. Her name is Judith Tanksley-Castro. She said to all who know her, she's Miss Judy. Miss Judy was born and raised in New Jersey, but since moved to New York and has made that her home for the 80s. We'll talk about some of the different transitions she's doing today. She's the youngest of 4 children to her parents. Miss Judy found herself pregnant at the age of 16 years old. And now she is the mother of 6 adult children, 13 grands and 1 great grand. Married at the age of 17, and years later she divorced, but now is currently married to her husband since 2011. Miss Judy once was a member of the Nation of Islam and since left. She was later introduced to Christ from a coworker. During that time, in her words, she said she backslid, like many of us do, and later rededicated her life to Christ. She found a new church and went to work later in heading many ministries in that church. She headed the women's ministry, drama ministry, and spoken word. Very talented. The church encouraged her later to return to school, and she attended NIAC, she'll tell me if I said that wrong, Theological Seminary, and obtained a bachelor's degree in psychology. I'll tell you what is so profound about her story as I finish tell you some of the highlights. Miss Judy has worked for several agencies for about 10 years and won a scholarship later to Silberman School of Social Work and obtained a master's degree in social work in 2019 at the age of 64 years old, she said. She said before all of that, she said she was battered. She was bruised. She was addicted to drugs. She lost her mother, and she found herself homeless. The degrees came after all of that. Everyone, help me welcome in Miss Judith Tanksley-Castro. Miss Judy, welcome to the Path Podcast. How are you?
I'm good. And yourself?
I am wonderful. Let me tell you, I am honored to have you on the show today. When your bio said so much more. And everyone, I didn't read it exactly the way it said because we will talk about a lot of what this woman went through. Because everyone, you heard about her receiving her master's degree at 64. But when you hear her story, you will marvel over what she's done. And let me tell everyone out there, we will talk about how she overcame a lot of the things that she's gone through. How this bold woman is bringing awareness, and how all of our survival skills don't look the same, but thank God we all survived. and how it's never too late to accomplish your goals. So, Miss Judith, let me start the show this way. I ask everybody this question. Tell me first about the younger Judith who thought she had life all figured out. What were your hopes and dreams as a child? And are you doing it today, even though we know you have gone through a lot?
As a young child, I was very lonely and isolated.
Mhm.
Um, was experiencing molestation and physical abuse.
Mhm.
So I think by the time I got to be a teenager, more or less, I was very damaged,
Mhm.
very, very damaged. And I just started hanging out with the wrong people and getting high.
Wow. And I'm sorry to hear that because that's a hard thing for any parent, and you being a parent yourself, to
Yes,
hear anything like that, because as children, it's supposed to be the most carefree time of our lives, let's say.
yes,
And
yes,
to have to experience that, and a lot of homes, unfortunately, and a lot of people can say they understand that story, but they don't talk about it. I don't like
yes,
the hush hush in families today when it comes to
exactly.
that for young people. Do you feel like, as a young person, even though I know you said you started hanging out and doing stuff, did you feel like you could talk to anyone? You didn't feel that way?
No, I
Yeah.
never spoke of the sexual abuse
Hmm.
until I guess I was in my 30s or 40s. I kept it to myself.
Yes. And let me tell you, that's what I've heard talking to some therapists and different people that I've had on the show, that they've said that, and just not the unfortunate act of molestation and that sexual violence that's done to people, but how we bring that into our young adult lives. Like you said, you didn't speak about it until 30. So you're in your 20s trying to operate in life, and
Yes,
and going into your 30s when you started talking about it. Did you feel like you were bringing healing to yourself as you talked about it, or it was just finally getting it out, you feel?
I went to rehab for
Mm.
substance abuse, and I shared it with my counselor there, and he
Oh.
took me out the next day to a park,
Hmm.
and he showed me a 6 year old because it started when I was 6,
Mm.
and I blamed myself. I blamed
Yes.
myself, and he showed me a 6 year old and asked me how could that child protect herself from a man. But
Thank you.
I didn't see myself as that child at the time. But then I realized that it wasn't my fault.
It always amazed me, Miss Judy, to hear everyone say that, because you're 6. At 6 years old, you're, really you're probably your second year of school,
Yes,
and the innocence of a child. You're
yes.
innocent, and for us still to blame ourselves, it marvels me that we still do that.
I
And
think too because it was a family member who did it, and
yeah.
his wife knew about it, and she
Mhm.
beat me because she said I was nasty and I was fresh. So that's what was in me. You're
Mhm.
fresh.
And let me tell you, I always look up statistics and different things like that. And according to statistics, as we already know, and I know you know more better than I do, of course, they always say that the majority of sexual assaults occur at or near the victim's home. And we
Yes,
know and normally it's a family member.
yes,
And 55% is saying it happens at the home.
yes.
And it amazed me when I heard 15% in an open or public place.
Mm, yeah.
So what you're saying is not surprising to me. And normally they always say it is someone you know. It is someone you know. And I promise you, it's unfortunate that the wife knew and also blamed you, the child. And we're skipping a lot, look sound like, but you were already talking to a therapist and it was because you were in a drug. What why were you there?
Rehab,
In
rehab.
drug rehab? Yeah.
Mhm.
And the drug rehab came about as everyone we will move into domestic violence. So it was the molestation. When did you start using the drugs? Around that same time in your teens?
In my teens, yes.
In your teens?
Yes,
By
I
that
was
time?
yeah, I was introduced to a $3 bag of dope.
Mm,
Um, I thought I had died and went to heaven.
really?
And I remember saying, this is what I'm going to do when I grow up, because that's how good it had made me feel at that time.
Today, now that you're have done a lot of work in psychology and social work, do you feel like it was something that you were trying to numb a pain? You were feeling good, of course, because it
Yes,
does that. But do you feel like now today it was something because you were numbing that pain when you started it?
yes, it was definitely numbing.
Yes.
Definitely,
Wow.
definitely.
And so you're doing at the young age doing the drugs. It felt good, of course. And were you dating? Were you in any healthier relationships at that time? Were you still at home, at your home
I
at the
was,
time?
I was still at home, but I was very promiscuous.
Very promiscuous.
Because,
And that happens, I've heard.
because I'm a bad girl, remember.
Yes.
Fresh, you
Yes.
know. So I was living up to the reputation that they told me I had.
Exactly. Everyone, I hope you heard what she said. That's when we put these words, and my daughter will always, she knows I always tell her words matter,
Yes,
especially for a child growing up to be. Let me tell you, Judith, the one thing I've heard as well, they say you revert back to that child like mind when you go through certain things in your life. So all you hear, of course, I'm fresh. I'm you, like you said, of course, you're fresh and you're living up to those words of being that person. But the point of what they put in her mind and her head, we become what you tell us we are. That's
yes,
why some people can, if I can tell you, Judith, you can be the next president of the United States of America or whatever you choose to do. When you put that in people, yes, that's why it's the same thing when you put negative things onto people.
yes,
We can believe what we hear and what we think of ourselves.
yes.
So at the time you saying you became very promiscuous. So you're out there and I still want to come up to that point before going into rehab.
Yeah,
That was rehab. Okay.
that was my
So
first therapy and rehab.
so let me ask you, what made you go to rehab at that time when you were in your 30s? What
Oh
made you do it?
my goodness. um, I had been in an abusive relationship where my husband had been
Hmm.
physically abusive, and he
Hmm.
was also a heroin addict. And
Mm.
I had he had beat one of the children, and I took my son to the hospital because
Hmm.
I want them to see it. I want them to help me. I want them to do something. And I
Of course.
and I took him to the hospital, and they took him away from me.
Um,
And they told me that he could not come back home unless my husband had left. So
hmm.
I was so happy to tell him, you got to go because we want to get Sal back. You got to go. You got to go. He left. When he left, I started getting high all the time
Mm.
because, ironically enough, even though my husband was an abuser, when the years that I was with him, I couldn't develop a drug habit because he would not stand for it. So I
Mm.
could only get high on occasion or get high when he was high, so he couldn't tell if I was high, you
Of
know.
course. Of
And
course.
so, but when he left, I could get high all the time now.
Okay, and let me say this. You said a lot in that period right there. I want to touch on your son the one when you say he abused him, then I also want to touch later on. I don't want to forget the part of why you felt like you couldn't get high with him.
Yeah.
I mean, when he was there. But
But
let me talk about your son first. When you talked about that, you said it started because of it was abusive relationship. And when he beat your son, that it was it normal for some of the children to
yeah,
be
he had a
abused?
he had got a bad report card, and I was trying to keep it from him, from my
Yes.
husband.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow he overheard a conversation, and he beat him because of his report card. But he had so many marks on his back and across his chest and across his
Mm-hmm.
legs. It was really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I I took him to the hospital.
The children, when they were always at home, how were they?
They were younger then. They were afraid. They really wanted him to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to when I think they was about 8 or 9, they would tell me things like, mommy, everybody's parents are not together. Like, it's okay if you are by yourself.
So I've heard that so many times over and over again with different people I've spoken to, that children feel that same way, and they encourage their parents sometimes to leave.
Yeah,
But of course, they're younger, they don't understand all that comes into just picking up and leave. Of course,
right.
it's not as easy as we all would like to think it is.
Leaving
Um,
leaving can also be very dangerous.
Exactly. And that's something I want to touch on too, because I read that, of course, to your point, everyone, they say it, and it's on the national domestic violence national website. They said the most dangerous time is the time you choose to leave.
Yeah.
So I want to touch on that very important point, but I want to go back first to the part where you said with using drugs. Why would he not want you to use it, or you felt like you couldn't get high with him? Glad you wasn't, but but what was the reason with him being using abusing drugs also?
Because his wife he held in a certain
Oh,
title. Like,
yes.
I had to be, holier than thou, or the
Hmm.
best mother. She don't get high. She doesn't hang out. She doesn't,
Hmm.
yeah. That's how
Yes.
he's seen me.
Yeah. That's interesting. And it's wonderful that he I mean, I don't know how his mind was working, but of course, to it's like you were the trophy wife. You were supposed to be this way, but he didn't treat you that way. That's the part that amazes me.
No, but he also knew that drug abuse ran in my family. He
Okay.
knew that. When I turned my 14, my brother died from an overdose of heroin. Um,
Mm.
I remember when he first met my family. Uh,
Hmm.
we was giving. They allowed me to have a back to school party at the end of the summer. I was going in,
Hmm.
and 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 he came to the party, and a couple of my cousins and sister-in-law, they had him in the back room holding the. They were shooting dope, and they had
Yes.
him holding the strap around their arm while they were shooting. And
Wow.
and he came out, he said, "That's your family?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because that's what they did."
It was yes. It was normal to you,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah,
Uh-huh. And so he thought that was strange.
yeah.
At that time, was he already using himself, or he wasn't
He
he
was using, but it wasn't habit. Like
okay.
he would get high
Yes.
on occasion, but
Got you.
it wasn't a habit. But he didn't know that my family was like that.
So, and you mind me asking, because this is not his story, his family, it wasn't prevalent in his family to the level, let's just say, so we don't talk about his family,
His
but
family,
to that level.
yeah, his family did not do drugs per se.
Hmm.
They had,
Hmm.
alcohol, but I don't think anybody
Yes.
had a problem
Yes.
per se.
Yes.
and they owned their own house, and they had big Cadillacs and
Yes.
blue wall-to-wall carpeting, and his family had,
Yes.
they were more
Yes.
upscale than ours.
Okay. So with you saying you lost your brother, what about your other siblings? I know you said your other siblings.
I had two brothers. One died at the age of 3 from surgery, and then my other brother Frankie, he died from a drug overdose, and my sister Carol, she died from alcoholism.
That is a lot to deal with right there. And with your siblings, because I know you're the youngest, so
Yes.
they were older than you.
There
But
was a 20-year gap between
wow.
my I'm the fourth, so between the third child and me, it was a 20-year
Yes.
gap.
So let me go back to the time, like you said, after you took your son to the hospital, they took him away from you. What was that time like for you when that happened? What happened next when you realized they were taking your son, one of your children?
I was first happy. Like I'm really getting, I'm getting rid of him.
Oh yeah, you're right. You said you were getting rid of your ex. I mean, yes.
Now he's going to go because I done put it so, they're going to take the kids, and I know he loved his kids, so he's going to go. But then when they took my son, I was like, I got very sad.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
Of
but
course.
I got him back quickly.
You did. So, but let me ask you, when you said you thankfully you got your son back quickly, but you started using the drugs because he wasn't there at the home more.
Right.
Did you find that becoming more and more definitely where it was causing a problem, or were you able to function?
It was causing a problem.
It was.
My husband eventually went to prison for what he did to my son. So when he went to prison, I was really getting high.
So he went to prison for that, but because you never reported him for the abuse towards you.
Yes, I did.
You did?
Yes, I did.
Oh wow! And
but at that time they didn't do much.
That's true.
They didn't do much.
They're just looking at it as just a little squirrel between husband and wife instead.
Yeah.
Until it happened to your son. And okay. And so how long did you have to press charges, or did the state does it themselves?
The state press charges.
Okay. You mind me asking how long did he get sentenced for?
About 18 months.
About 18. So what did that do for you? Did he try contacting you? How was that relationship? Because you're still married.
Yeah, he calls periodically. Yeah, to check up, on us. But he had heard, that I was getting high, and
he did.
And I just didn't care.
Yes. So was that not a time where you were thinking, okay, I need to truly try to see if we can get away, because if he gets out, 18 months to sometimes does seem like it's forever. So you felt like you had a break, of course. No, were you ever thinking that it was over, or were you you just say, no, I'm just getting high, and you just living your life then?
He actually got out that 18 months. The drugs had taken me to totally down. I had lost my apartment. I lost my car. My kids were staying with his family. And I was in New York getting high.
In that period, what happened leading up to the point when you said again that I have to get help?
So I wanted my kids back.
That's important, because Judith, as we know, there are a lot of people who experience drug abuse, domestic violence, and different things, and still don't make that decision. Because I think it's hard for some people to understand that when we deal with any type of trauma, abuse, or anything, we would want to tell the person, we wish that the person could stop using, just stop, because for the sake of the children. But some people can't.
Exactly.
Some people can't.
They can't. They just
exactly. So what do you think? You said you wanted your children back, But my gosh, Judy, like I say, what we just said, it's not easy.
No, it
I mean,
wasn't. It
and
wasn't.
so you wanted your children, thankfully, you wanted your children back. And did you or someone talk to you and say, okay, here's a place you should try going here and talk to these
No,
people?
no. I was working for the state of New York.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically enough, even during my times that I was getting high, and
Mm-hmm.
and I kept a job.
Wow.
So my union, I went to my union rep and my EAP. They gave me an EAP coordinator who helped me get into rehab.
It's amazing, everyone. Again, that's why I always say our paths, they don't look the same how it happens.
Yeah,
You still had to make the decision to say, okay, yes, I will, because we know a lot of people have lost even so much more. Again, I can't keep reiterating that
yeah.
everybody thinks it's as simple as how she decided to go ahead and go. So when you made the decision to go, so now again, you're talking to the rehab, the person, the therapist in the rehab.
Yeah,
And again, I love the fact how he took you to that park, you said,
yeah.
and showed you a 6-year-old.
Hmm.
That was profound to see that child out there, to understand, for you to see again, this is an innocent baby.
Right.
And so when you dealt with that, were you still married? You were you still considered married to your husband at the time?
Yeah, yeah.
He was still in jail by that time.
He no, he had came
Okay,
out.
he was out.
He had came out when I decided, but the kids was with him and his family.
Okay,
And
okay.
when I decided, but he came out and he started getting high again too. And
Hmm.
he went into rehab also.
Oh, wonderful. Well, that's a good
Yeah,
thing.
rehab also, yeah.
So let me ask you this: how do you deal with then at that time? Were y'all still debating if y'all were going to stay together, even though y'all were in rehab?
No, no, because I was seeing someone else and
Okay, y'all were
I,
fully done by that time.
yeah, we were done after that.
So again, like when you made the point, that is a critical point for everyone to understand how leaving is the most dangerous time for anyone who's been involved with domestic violence. How did that go about then? How did that go where you felt safe enough to do what you did?
I felt safe enough then because I had tried to leave him several times before.
Mm-hmm.
And he at one point he kicked in people's doors with guns and would
Wow.
drag me out.
Wow.
I had tried several times and people just point blank told me, don't come to my house,
Oh,
come to my house, because they knew what he would do. But this time when we broke up and left, he didn't want to the kids to be taken away.
mm,
I had stressed the importance of them. If they ever find out, they're going to come and take all these kids away. So
mm.
that was the reason why he didn't go off like he had in the past.
So let me tell you, uh, I want to go from Judith to Miss Judy, but Judith, that is so critical because you were shunned from people, from the many times that you've gone to their house, because they know we didn't talk about the level of violence that was brought upon you,
Yeah.
the parts that you dealt with. We know what he did to his son, so I know it had to be hard for you. But you say he would bust people doors down to come get you and drag you out. Do
Yeah.
you mind sharing? Because I want people not to, because let me tell you what it sounds like to me. You give him credit to say, okay, thank God that he had something that stayed in him to say, okay, no, I don't want this to happen again, that they take the children. Not
Right.
saying, the things that he did was good, because of course he abused y'all in different ways for whatever reasons. But what is the one thing that that stands out to you besides what he's done to your son, or some of the other children, to
Um,
yourself at least, that was the most painful thing? One of.
he beat me once in front of my mother, and that
Mm,
my mother was older. She walked with a walker, and he and she was trying to hit him with her cane, like get off her, get off her. He kicked me in my back during the process, and I was hospitalized, and they put me in the psychiatric ward.
Why would they put you in the psychiatric ward?
Because I couldn't stop crying.
But why a psychiatric ward instead of even just someplace else? They just felt like that was the only answer instead of saying, okay, let's just, just trying to understand that. I guess it's hard for me to understand.
I don't understand it either. I just know I couldn't stop crying. My back was hurting. Every time I stood up, I passed out from the pain, and they put me in the psychiatric ward.
How long did you have to stay there?
I stayed there a couple of weeks.
You didn't like the fact that your mother had to see that. And you stayed in there a couple of weeks, and when you came out, what do you do after something like that?
You pick up and you just do what you do. I got kids. My oldest son was autistic. Okay. At that particular time, I had 3 kids. So I did what I had to do. I take care of my family. In spite of, you put on a happy face, cover up your bruises, and you do what you got to do. And that's basically what I did.
Once again, everyone, a survivor. That's what you did. And because remember what you said to me when we spoke months ago, Judith? You said, but yet I live. I'll never forget that statement when you said that to me.
Yes.
And everyone, because she talks about, for sake of time, we have to keep the story moving, but I know she can tell us many more unfortunate stories of what she went through and the domestic, because that's a story that is visual enough that no one would ever want to experience. And the point with domestic, with the violence, with the hitting and the touching, did he also, like, mentally, was it abusive for you as well? Yes.
Oh my God. But when he didn't realize the damage so much he did, because he was always, my mother was a very big woman.
Yes.
Okay. She weighed about 260, but she was 4'11", so it looked much bigger on her.
Yes.
He always tell me, you're going to be just like your mother. You're going to be fat and ugly. And who do you think I ever want you? And I weighed exactly 140 pounds. And I thought at that time, I wish I was that now. I thought that I wish I was that fat.
Yeah, because then
Yes, I was so fat. And who do you think gonna want you? Ain't nobody gonna want you. With your ugly fat self, don't nobody want you. But the minute, like if I would walk down the street and a man would say like, hey baby, I'd be like, you talking to me? You couldn't be talking to me. But he just had me open to a man to come in. All he had to do was pay attention to me. And I'm like, okay, I'll go with you.
Of course. Because it felt good to get the attention, because how he's put all the negative words into you and just demean you with his words. And again, that 6-year-old Judith is believing what you hear.
Right.
I'm not beautiful because I'm fat, even though I hate when people call, people use those words to people today, especially. But yeah, so you're believing what he says, and that is definitely a form of abuse as well. We know, everyone. I'm glad you went in to get the help you needed, and eventually he did. Do you mind, or can you share, did ever, when you came out feeling like, when you finished your therapy, do you feel like you worked off a lot of the things that you understood better at that time, or after your therapy, or did you go through more? Did you do anything else?
Please note that I went into rehab more than once. The first time, it took me about a month before I right? But I got back in. I went back into rehab before it got to the level that it was. The first time. And then I went to a halfway house afterwards. I went to a halfway house. I had one of my peers, he was a cop actually, and he was in therapy with me in the hospital. And he knew that was my second time. And he got out before me, but he came back and escorted me to the halfway house because he wanted to make sure I got there. And I never seen him again.
Wow. Really?
I never seen him again. And I often wonder, because he worked at the World Trade Center, and I often wondered, did he get caught up in 9/11? He took me to from Manhattan to Queens by train. He took me to make sure I got there.
Wow, that's awesome. And to go back to what you're saying, so you've been in rehab more than once. Again, there's something that everyone out there should not surprise us. So with all of that, so even though you went to rehab, we have to know in your mind, you still dealing with the rehab of, again, I'll keep going back to the 6-year-old Judith. You're going back to the domestic violence, the betrayal, even of the wife of the relative that knew, who put words on you.
Yeah.
All of that has to come off of you. And of course, then we go into, of course, the domestic violence and all you dealt with that mentally and physically. All of that has to come off of a person, everyone. We have to stop thinking that they're in there just for one thing. Sometimes it's a work in progress of what a person would have to go through.
Yes.
So with, after you gone in and came out and everything, and you said in your bio that when did the part you were in the Nation of Islam, not that we have to talk about that, but you were in the midst of that during all of that time when you were dealing with all of this?
Right. I went and I became a member, I believe, when I was 17 years old. What happened though is that I got pregnant with my daughter and I was not married, so I was suspended. When I had a 5-year suspension put on me. But if you get married, your suspension will be lifted. So when I did get married, I had to I waited a little while, but I had to stand up in front of the congregation at the end of the service, and they would, look, the brother minister would have them to look at me. And if they seen me doing anything that I should not have been doing, maybe at a party or at a club or out drinking or whatnot, he wanted them to say something. Okay. And as I was looking at the audience, and I can see brother so-and-so, and I know he sold drugs, and brother so-and-so, he cheating on his wife. And I'm like, who are they to judge me? And I never went back. I was allowed back in, but I never went back.
You never went back.
Not to put down the Nation of Islam.
Not at all. Not at all.
Because I have many years later, I had a sister going to my church that got pregnant, and she had to stand up in front of the congregation. And I didn't appreciate that either.
Oh, wow.
So that they do that in the Christian church too.
But just don't judge. Stop the judgment, everybody. So I'm agreeing with you on that part. Yes, it's not one over the other. No. Yes. But I appreciate that. So you left there, and then you said a coworker introduced you to Christ.
Yeah, years later. Years later, as I was living in Newark, and I was working in Staten Island. And I was the ride to work that day, we were supposed to meet at the corner where she lived at. And I was standing there with her. And let me just give you a little bio of her. She was, she was saved, and she was, a minister in her church, and she was, very, 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 very prophetic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I really didn't give her the respect that she deserved, because I would be in the car cursing or smoking or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't give her that respect that she deserved.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I'm standing there with her and I said, I'm tired. I said, I'm tired. And she looked up and said, thank you, Jesus.
Ah.
And she said, I've been praying for you, little girl. She called me little girl. She said, I've been praying for you, little girl, for so long, And she invited me to her church. And I started going to her church. I didn't know anything about church per se.
Mm-hmm.
And I started going with her. It was a little storefront church. Overcoming Faith Church of Christ, little storefront church, and then had a handful of members. And I started going there and following her and listening to her, and I was pregnant. I was pregnant with my fourth child, and started, but I started listening to her, and I changed my life around. I changed my life around. And then my husband, I introduced him to them, and he started going to the church. And he stopped getting high, and he stopped doing, things. There was no more fighting. There was nothing. And I was like, yo, we finally got it. We finally got it. Until one day I got in our car, and the ashtrays, he had put the ashtrays back in the car. Yeah. Because he had started smoking cigarettes again. And it started with that. And then it led up to drugs. And then he told me, I remember him saying one day to me, making love to you disgusts me. And I thought that God had forsaken me.
Yeah.
He had, how you let me go back, how it come back with this man and this, and now he's telling me this. And he moved and he moved out of my room. He didn't want to sleep with me no more. He slept in my son's room. My son slept in my daughter's room, and my daughter slept with me. And I thought God had forsaken me, but I did not know that he had contracted AIDS.
Are you kidding? Wow.
And had he continued to sleep with me, I might not be having this conversation with you today. Because I lost 3 girlfriends to AIDS that they got from their husbands, not in the street getting high. Their husbands gave it to them, and they died. So had he not got out of my bed.
Yes.
So God didn't forsake me.
Ooh, he protected you.
He protected me.
Everyone, did you hear that? Sometimes we look at what God does and we ask him why, and we cry and we want this, but I thank God he knows what's best. And anyone out there, if you're just continuously seek him, he'll show you.
Yes, he will.
He will show you. And I'm sorry to hear about your friends. I'm so sorry to hear about them. And thank God he's protected you. That's I know I can't stay on that topic because I will, but when he contracted the AIDS, you found out after he
left. Yeah, after the thing with my son and everything, and after he was gone. Yeah. But he had AIDS. Yeah. When he went into rehab, that's when he found out he had AIDS. Okay. And he did not tell me that he had it. He had tried to sleep with me several times after that, knowing that he had it. Wow. But I wouldn't do it.
By that time, it was not in you to you definitely was not. You were done. And that was good. You were past that.
To this day, his family believes that I gave him AIDS.
Are you kidding?
Yes, they believe that I gave it to him, but it's okay. Yeah, because I know I didn't have it then, and I don't have it
now.
and
Yes,
and I'm okay. You know,
exactly.
but if that's what they want to believe, then that's on them. It ain't
Of
got nothing to do
course.
with me.
Of course. And after that, did you what happened next? After all of that, did you go back to church? Were you I'm sure that's a time when you felt like you pulled from the church some, or was that at a different
Yeah,
time?
when he said that
Mm-hmm.
to me, I did pull back because I remember going to work because I worked 12 midnight to 8 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And when I
Mm-hmm.
got to work that night, they said, you don't got 3 calls. Somebody called you, and it was this guy who I had went out with.
Yes.
He
Uh-huh.
called me, and I made a date with him the next
Mm-hmm.
day, and
Mm-hmm.
he picked me up in his van.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I drove my car to the liquor store. I got me some wine. Okay, and I went, and he had a license plate that said "Do it in the van," and I
Uh-huh.
did it in a van that night with that man. And each time I got further and further away.
From God. I get what you, yes, yes,
But that was my initial step
yes.
because I believed that God had forsaken me.
Forsaken me. Yes, of course. Of
And
course.
my husband says making love to me disgusts him. And here's a man that wasn't disgusted by it at
Of
all.
course. Of course. I
So
got it.
I
Yeah.
did it, and I kept doing it over and
And
over.
over.
Yes.
Everyone, we know there are responsibilities to some of the things that we do, but we thank God he's that forgiving God.
Yes.
Yeah, there are consequences and all of that, but
Consequences.
he still is a loving God,
Yes.
and he wants us still
Yes.
to come to him.
Yes.
So when
Yes.
you turn everything and went back to and you found a new church, you said
Yeah, it took me years. It
years.
took me years, okay,
Yes.
to get back. I remember falling on my knees in my apartment in New York and asking God, please take me back. I'm no longer praying, oh, let him love me or this one, or
Yeah.
praying for this thing or praying for that thing. Just take me back. I
Yes.
want to go back to where you used to talk to me. I
Mm.
want to go back to when you trusted me. You know,
Mm.
I want to go
Mm-hmm.
back there. And it's like I felt such a relief. It's like
Mm.
he said, okay, now we can work with that, you know?
Yes.
And it didn't take overnight. I mean, I did, and right after that, I became homeless with 5 kids with me.
Wow.
Okay, my
Still.
daughter was on drugs and she was in the street. I didn't know where she was. Okay,
Mm.
and I was determined. I'm going back home.
Mm-hmm.
Go back home.
Yes.
Okay. And I went through a lot through the shelter system and with my kids and whatnot, but God was faithful.
He was
He
faithful.
was faithful
Mm.
and sent me to a church where most of the people there were educated, and I had never been around educated people before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they, Judy, you could go back to school and so forth and so on, and I was able to, seek an education.
Now let's go back to one thing you said, and I know everyone, for sake of time, I know I'm going to have to move this on, but what I love what you said. Okay, now you're around a different group of people who, like you said, these are what you consider, and everyone, we know everybody does not have to have degrees,
Yeah,
but now you would, and again, now you got people telling you what opposite of what the 6-year-old little girl heard.
right.
You can go to school.
You can go to school.
So when they said those things to you, what did you think no, or would you like, yeah, I can?
I had, as a young girl, I always wanted to go to college and school.
Yes.
I remember telling my mother that once,
Mhm.
when I was going into high school, and I'm taking high school preparatory classes because I want to go to college. And she looked
Yeah.
at me, and I thought she would be so proud. She looked at me. She said, "Girl, you better hurry up and get that high school diploma and get a job."
Yeah.
And
And
it's
let me tell
so,
you, for sake of her, sometimes that's what that generation was taught.
yes, That's what they
Also,
were
so
taught. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
sometimes that's what they were taught. But yes, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Yes. So I changed my classes to general, and I did the heck with it, but I
Yes.
always wanted to learn. So when
Yeah.
somebody said you can go back to school, I was like, I always wanted to, you know,
Mm,
and and then it was a Christian school,
mm.
so
Yes.
it was helpful in a lot of ways, and I met a lot of interesting people that I will probably know until the day I leave this earth.
But what I love is everyone, I didn't want to gloss over, like she said, it all happened in different times where she was at church, but then you, like you said, you were homeless with the children, your 5 kids, and unfortunately, where some of your other kids were, your daughter, you were saying,
Yes,
strung out, but still, you went back still into the church. You found a home. You went back into church. You have these people giving you this new life, look like, to say, okay, you can do this. You decided to go back because it was always in you. That's the one thing, Judith. It was always in you. It's just that your environment and your surroundings at the time didn't prepare you or help lift you into to go into those areas. But
yes,
God, is never too late, everyone.
no,
That's the one thing, because for you to say you got your masters at 64,
yes,
I everyone, is never too late. Age is truly just a number.
yeah.
It's never too late to go back and do the things that you know that you what made you then, after, like you said, after the getting it, you started, you went to get your degree, what made you say, okay, now I'm going to go get the master?
My director at the program that I was working in had also been a member of my church.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, Judy, I wanted to recommend you for the for this master's program. So
Mm-hmm.
she told me to sign up for it, and I had to write an essay and whatnot. And I wrote my essay like a testimony.
Wow.
Like, because a social worker. I've been a social worker most of my life. It seems like I'm working for, if these kids, my
Yes.
kids, or my husband, or my husband, now he'll go and get a neighbor and say, mommy, help her, bring her to the door.
Aw.
So I've
Yes.
always doing this. So why don't I just get the
Why to get
paperwork now?
because everyone, again, it was innately in you. You're telling it your story. That's why I can imagine why I can see why when you said you wrote your paper, it was about your testimony.
Yes,
That's what opens doors for you, because that's how God uses us, to me,
yes,
is to help someone else.
yes.
And that story, your story, is so powerful, as well as all the wonderful accomplishments, to let people still see, but yet I live.
But yet I live, and
Yet
yet
I
I
live.
am still. I'm still trying to make changes. Moving to Georgia is a change, you
That is
know.
something new you got coming up,
And
that you're
right,
working on now today.
right, and it's been discouraging. Like
Mm-hmm.
my husband has said, you going back? I say yes, because I'm not finished.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
finished. We're gonna find a place there.
Yes.
I said, I'm gonna find a job. But most of my friends now have retired and they're sitting in the yard, right?
Yeah.
But I
Yes.
said, but I didn't get this degree until I was 64. I want to do something with it. You see,
Wow.
I want to do something with it. So I don't want to sit in the yard with this degree. Can I work a little bit longer? Just a little bit.
You have the
Yeah,
heart for it.
yes,
You're young at heart, still ready to. Everyone out there, if anyone out there, we pray. I believe in the universe. He's protected you all this time, Judith.
yes,
I believe the doors are still, they're opening for wherever he says you're supposed to be. And so
yes.
if anyone out there is looking, she's looking to move to the Atlanta, Georgia area. And if you know of anyone looking, is social work, of psychology, what area would you be looking for to move into, Judith?
Social work. I would love to work with seniors.
Mm,
That
mhm.
that I was a guardian for a long time, and I worked with seniors. They're about my age now, but I love them.
I know, right? If I hear of anything, I will let you know. But for sake of time, Judith, let me go and ask you one other question. Well, I say one and maybe one or two.
Okay.
Tell me, what attributed to your motivation to continue after all you've been through? What gave you the motivation to still say, but yet I live? What is your motivating factor?
I wasn't ready to die yet.
Mm.
I didn't, and somebody, my father told my mother many years ago, because he had started another family and whatnot, and he told her that her kids wasn't shit. Excuse my language. That the kids he had with this other woman were much better than none of her kids was worth anything. Now my everybody else was dead but me. So and it hurt her so bad she cried for hours. I when I'm told I can't, I hear him saying that I ain't whatever. I can't. I know it made her proud.
Yes. That's powerful. So let me also ask you this. If there is someone out there today that you know is dealing with, who has experienced, let's say, what you experienced as that 6-year-old little girl, the young lady who became a teen mom, dealt with domestic violence. Like you said, you were promiscuous. What would you share with her today to say you can come out of this? And the drug abuse. What kind of advice would you want to give someone out there?
I want them to know that this does not, the words that were said to you does not define who you are. God sees you much differently than that. And he loves you. And he will send people to encourage you and lift you up. It won't always be like this. I know sometimes it feels like it ain't never going to change. Nothing ever gets better, but it won't always be like this. It won't always be like this. You will come through. You will. You have to have a determination, and God will help you, and he will send people to help us. He will open doors that you thought were nailed shut.
Yes, I love that. And so if the 67-year-old Miss Judy could turn back the time and talk to the 18-year-old Judith,
we're going to have to go back a little further. We might got to go back to 16.
The 16. Okay, let's do the 16.
By 18, I already had 2 kids. Let's go back to 16. Okay.
I love that. What would she tell the 16-year-old Judith?
You can do anything, mommy. You could do anything. Anything. Don't let nobody tell you what you cannot do. You can do it all and some. You are pretty. You are smart.
Judith, none of that changes even to this day.
Yeah.
Every little child needs to hear that.
Yeah.
I know you're talking to the 16-year-old, but that little 3-year-old, that 5-year-old, 6-year-old needs to hear that.
Yeah. I tell my grandkids that all the time.
Yes.
All the time. Ironically enough, I got a lot of them that look just like me. I don't know how that happened. You know, I'm always telling them because generational curses is real.
That's a real thing. And it has to be broken.
Yes.
It is real and it has to be broken. And it's in every family has something that they would say they would want to break. Yes. Everyone, you've heard this story from this powerful woman, this bold woman who you never gave up, Judith. You never gave up. And it shows how God, I always say, how he orchestrates it. It is a path. You know, your survival guide through this life, it was not easy every time, like you said, but you survived. Your story is powerful. We can go on. I may have to bring her back on one day for something else. if anyone out there, I believe, is looking for someone who would like to even speak on this to show other women it can be done, I believe Miss Judith Tanksley-Castro is that person you would want to connect with. I don't want to put your contact information out there, but if you have any way that you would want to me to share any of your contact information, or if you choose to share, if anyone is looking for you to come speak to an organization or come call
They
you
can,
regarding employment.
they can email me.
Mm-hmm.
Judy and Devotional. JUDYANNDEVOTIONAL at Gmail.
And everyone, I will put that in the show notes. Judith, is there anything else you would like to share? Something I didn't ask that maybe you would want to share with everyone before we end the show?
I just thank you for the opportunity to talk about what God has brought me through.
Mm-hmm.
I used to sing a song in the choir, testify. Somebody ought to testify. And I've always been the one to testify. So I take talking to you like a testimony.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody else is going through it, it's like when I used to do spoken word and go to places about domestic violence, and the men generally would leave. But there always was a woman that was held, that just stayed back and came up to me and said,
yes.
I'm going through that.
Yes.
So no matter how many people I spoke to that day, I came for her.
Yes.
I came for her. Okay. And it's just like whoever hears this, somebody that is listening needed it today. And this conversation is for them. Amen. That God continues to use me and you to help them.
I so agree with that.
I just want to add something quickly.
Please.
My first husband right now is going through dementia, right? And he lives by himself, but he calls me one day, and I barely understood, knew. I said, who is this? And he said, Vernon. I couldn't believe you calling me, and he said, I need to talk to you. So I said, okay. So I asked my husband now, would it be all right if I went to talk to him? And I went to talk to him, and he said, he was babbling on about the CIA and the FBI, dementia things.
Yeah.
It looked like God gave him clarity. And he looked up at me and he said, I just want to tell you, I'm so sorry for what I did. He apologized.
What was your response after that? And I believe I would know what it is, but
I told him I forgave him a long time ago.
So, and that's what, let me tell you, everyone out there, we say that's for divorce, no matter what it is. The forgiveness is not for the person.
Yeah.
It's for you.
It's for you. Yeah.
So, and like you say, God gave him the clarity at that moment.
That's right.
Oh, I'm glad you were able to receive that. That is a blessing. Well, let me tell you, we're about to end the show, Judith. And thank you again. I can't thank you enough for being that willing vessel for the world. And I can't wait to see all that you do. I can't wait to see the big things that you continue to do. And when you come into Atlanta, you're going to have to let me know you're here in Atlanta and that you found that job where they purpose, because you got purpose. Sometimes I always say it's not just a job, it's purpose. So to know that. And if I hear of anything, I will let you know and reach out to you myself.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you again. And everyone out there, let me end the show this way. I read something that they said, if you ever talk to anyone or anyone who has experienced all that Miss Judy or anyone else out there has shared with us today, The one thing we should never ask a survivor is, why did they stay?
Right.
Never
Right.
ask, why did they stay? Just what we need to do is stop blaming survivors for staying and start supporting them to enable
Yes.
them to leave. By
Yes.
understanding the many barriers that stand in the way of a woman or man leaving an abusive relationship, be it psychological, emotional, financial, or physical threats, we can begin to support and empower women to make the best decision for them while holding abusers solely responsible for their behavior.
Yes.
If you know someone in need of help today, Judith and I would like to say, contact the National Domestic Violence website.
Yes.
Like she said earlier, it is the most dangerous time when you plan to leave. That your safety is their first priority if you did contact them. They say you deserve a future without fear, and you are not alone. The hotline number is 1-800-799-7233. That's 1-800-799-7233. Or you can teletype at 1-800-787-3224. Again, the teletype number is 1-800-787-3224. For the National Sexual Assault Hotline, you can contact RAINN at RAINN.org, and that stands for Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. And their number is 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-4673. Everyone, until next time. Thank you again, Judith. Thank you, everyone, for hanging with us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and other platforms, so you can stay up on our bi-weekly, real conversations with these bold women. You can follow The Path Podcast on Facebook at The Path Podcast and on Instagram and Twitter at The Path_podcast. And if you would like to be a guest on the show or have questions for a future show, you can email us at thepath4ward@gmail.com. That's thepathforward@gmail.com. And if you're looking for a speaker or you're in need of a life coach, please reach out to me. Again, at thepathforward@gmail.com or at ACKORLEH@gmail.com. Thank you. Until next time.